Fear and outrage across the United States as the Trump administration intensifies its crackdown on immigration. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. More than 40 million immigrants and their families across the United States have been reeling from an immigration crackdown. Monday saw an increased ICE presence at a Los Angeles park during a children's summer camp. The Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, spoke out about the incident that took place in an area known for its large immigrant community.
To me, this is another example of the administration ratcheting up chaos by deploying what looked like a military operation in an American city. So I went to MacArthur Park because it is very important that the truth be told about what happened there. Now, you can spin it any way you like, but in my opinion, it's a political agenda of provoking fear and terror. Frankly, it is outrageous and un-American.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has been touting a new immigration detention center, Alligator Alcatraz, as it's called, that can detain up to 5,000 migrants and will cost American taxpayers $450 million a year. The facility is now open but has received backlash over potential humanitarian and environmental concerns. To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Texas, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch is an immigration attorney. And here in Washington, D.C., Abel Nuñez is the executive director of the Central American Resource Center known as CARECEN. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Abel Nuñez, let me start with you. This crackdown has been gathering pace. We see across the country ICE agents have been going into people's homes. They've been arresting people on the street as well. And as I mentioned, we had that incident in the Los Angeles park. We saw video of ICE agents sweeping through a park, going after immigrants there, and as we heard the mayor of the city calling it a city under siege, under armed occupation. Those are very tough words from the mayor, very emotive language. But what is this doing to immigrant communities? Because we did hear from the former commissioner of the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, Doris Marsden, and she said the fear factor is an important part of the overall mass deportation initiative.
No, that is correct. This is about creating fears in communities so that they will self-deport. They know that they don't have the ability or the capacity to do it, although the new bill that was just approved, the new budget, adds, billions of dollars for immigration enforcement. The reality is that they don't have capacity. So they have to do it in a way that's very public, that one, creates fear in the community, but I think importantly for the Trump administration, shows their base that they are accomplishing what they promised in the campaign trail. But all it does is really create fear, and in practice, it doesn't do much, because to date, they haven't really increased the numbers of deportations from previous administrations. It has gone up a little bit in terms of arrests, but in deportations, it remains pretty steady. And I think that because there is a process in this country, it's going to take a long time before it actually gets to the level that they want it to.
Kate, one of the things we are seeing with this massive sweep that's taking place across the country, that there are people who are undocumented who are getting swept up, as well as people who are here in the country legally, people who are citizens, people who are permanent residents.
That's right. They are just, it's very scattershot. It's very messy and chaotic, these actions that they're taking. Of course, we've seen the agents, we've seen the videos. They're in masks, they're in plain clothes. They're just going out on the street and arresting anyone that they can. And if somebody says, I'm a citizen or I'm a permanent resident, but I don't have my green card on me, they don't care. They will detain that person anyway. And they're also, of course, going and picking up what I'm calling the low-hanging fruit, the law-abiding immigrants who are in some type of legal process, and they're showing up for their court proceedings or their ICE check-ins. Many of these people entered the country with permission. They have work permits. They're literally doing everything that they are supposed to do and doing it the right way. And ICE is trying to boost their numbers, and so, as Abel said, and so they're going after people who are literally walking into their doors, and they're throwing them in these horrific detention centers, and they're separating families. I'm working on many cases as an immigration lawyer in Texas, just horrific stories that would break your heart of children, babies being taken away from their parents, sent to separate detention centers, sent into foster care. I mean, the heartlessness and the cruelty of what they're doing to people really breaks hearts, breaks your heart.
All right, Kate, there's also been a development today in the so-called birthright citizenship case. A federal judge has certified a class action suit which blocks President Trump's executive order to try and block birthright citizenship. What is the implication of this ruling?
I think that's great. If we can get a class certified, it means that the executive order attempting to cancel birthright citizenship won't be going into effect. Of course, we all heard about the Supreme Court decision supposedly about birthright citizenship, but actually the decision was about nationwide injunctions and whether lower federal courts can issue emergency injunctions against policies that apply nationwide. And this has been a way that many lower federal courts have stopped policies on an emergency basis from going into effect. And the alternative, if the Supreme Court doesn't allow emergency injunctions, is class certification. And there's a reason that this vehicle hasn't been utilized. It's much more cumbersome and it can take longer. It can take up to 6 months to have a class certified. So in the future, we might see policies go into effect and lower federal courts unable to stop them quickly. But I've thought all along in the case of birthright citizenship that we won't actually see the cancellation go into effect. It's so blatantly unconstitutional and illegal that at the end of the day, the federal court system just is not going to allow the president to cancel birthright citizenship through executive order. It's just not legally possible. And so there's been a lot of confusion about it because of the decision on nationwide injunctions. But to answer the question, class certification on the question of birthright citizenship is proper. I'm glad to hear it's coming, and it's what I expected, that we're not ultimately going to see this policy go into effect.
Abel, Nuñez, one of the cases that's been very closely followed is that of Kilmer Abrego Garcia. He's been in the news for quite a few weeks. President Trump deported him to El Salvador. Then the administration said that he was deported by mistake. He has now returned to the United States, but he's still being held. He's still being held in prison, and he's facing charges of trafficking. And the latest we heard that he's now being threatened with deportation again, even before he appears in court. What is this case about, and what is the message that it sends to others?
Well, I think that this is a very emblematic case of how the administration is processing. They want to break every rule, every due process, and they can't see themselves losing. So when Congressman Glenn Ivey, went after the senator went and shed light on the situation, that it was more than just about this gentleman. It was about the due process of every American. And I think people began to realize that this creates danger for them, that the state can pick you up and send you anywhere else where you would lose your rights. So this is about an administration trying to bully the judicial system into acquiescence to their policy and not taking them as an equal partner in government, right? They are the third branch, and they had set protections. So it's important for them not to see that they capitulated to the judiciary as they have been given orders. Remember, Mr. Abrego Garcia was protected from deportation prior to him to be sending to El Salvador. Then the administration said that they couldn't do anything about it, that it was up to the government of El Salvador, which they have a partner in, and the president of El Salvador said the same thing. And then when the political winds were changing, they immediately went to El Salvador without consulting the president of El Salvador and just brought him back. But they had to give him charges in order not to seem as they bent their knee to the Supreme Court, or I'm sorry, to the judiciary. So at this moment, what we're seeing is that this can lead to a constitutional crisis where you have the executive branch far exceeding their authority and not being able to be put in check either by the judiciary or an unwilling Congress, the legislature. So I think this is about the fundamental tenements of our judicial system, of our Constitution.
All right. Kate, what are your thoughts on the Abrego Garcia case? As Abel Nuñez points out, it goes beyond actually immigration. It goes to fundamental legal rights in the United States, doesn't it?
Oh, I agree. I 100%. And in terms of his specific case, of course, they brought him back and this is the perfect uses of trumped up charges. They charged him with alien smuggling to save face, and they've got him in federal detention, and the charges against him are very flimsy. And the federal judge is finding all sorts of issues with the evidence and his continued detention. I will say, though, that my concern for him specifically is that when someone is granted withholding of removal, it protects them from deportation to the country from which they are protected, which for him is El Salvador. It does not protect them from removal to a third country. So I could definitely see a scenario in which the Trump administration attempts to remove him to a third country, even after all of this coverage, because these criminal charges are probably not going to stick, and they're certainly, not going to just release him out on the street, I wouldn't imagine, although that would be the proper thing to do and the fair and just thing to do for this poor man. But I think we might see him ultimately deported elsewhere.
Right, and on that question of deportation to a third country, we've just seen the Supreme Court allow the administration to deport some migrants to South Sudan. They have no connection with South Sudan, but that's where they're going to be deported to.
Yes, and that is very disturbing and disgusting and concerning, and I hope that everybody understands the far-reaching implications of the allowance of something like this. I mean, Trump himself has said he doesn't want to limit third country deportations to immigrants, that he would be just fine deporting U.S. citizens to other countries in this way, and that the Supreme Court allowed this behavior was shocking, surprising, and concerning. And I don't know what the future holds with these third country removals, but I mean, it has been reported that people aren't just being deported and freed in a third country, they're being deported to a third country and being detained indefinitely without charges. And in some cases, there have been reports that they might even be sold into slavery. I mean, it's just unconscionable. And it's one of the ways in which I was very surprised to see the judiciary fall in line with the Trump administration. It's just flat out gross.
Abel Nuñez, we're also hearing of these cases where citizens of a number of countries have had their temporary protected status terminated. These include people from Afghanistan, Cameroon, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And once this kind of status, this protected status, is terminated, it cannot be reinstated. So where does that leave the thousands of people affected by this?
Well, temporary protected status was designed as a temporary measure to protect individuals. Unfortunately, our Congress has been unable to reform laws to allow people that have been here for a long time, have been productive members of and citizens of this nation, to give them a path to legalization. But unfortunately, as this temporary statuses are taken away, they revert back to being undocumented. So immediately what that means is that they will lose their work permit, they will lose their driver's license, and be susceptible to deportation back to their country of origin. For a lot of countries, particularly like Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, they have been in this program for over 20 years, and that is because previous governments, both Democratic and Republican governments, have determined that the countries of origin could not absorb their nationals, so they've always protected them, and Congress has been unable to create a path out of that temporary status. So we're really looking at people suffering. These are people that have built lives, have property, businesses, again, and this is detrimental to our economy. In certain industries, they're hyper concentrated, and so what we will see is not just those families suffering, but also other members of the community, other businesses, and the community as a whole. So this is again a political ploy to create real pain in the community and punish people just for doing that. This is anti-immigrant, this is anti-poor, and unfortunately is a road that we are that we are continually to fight against, and we're asking our elected officials to really step in and provide protections for these people that deserve it, and because they have been contributing members to this nation.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Abel Nuñez, Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, thanks to both of you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
To continue our conversation, joining us now from Florida, Eric Bolling is the host of Bolling podcast and show. Eric, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. Eric, you know, when President Trump ran for election, one of the key platforms in which he ran was immigration. And there are many who believe that it was his proposed policies on immigration that led to his win in the election. Now we see those policies being put into action, and there is a widespread sweep throughout the country. He's cracking down on migrants. But we're also seeing legal migrants, people who are here legally, being caught up in this sweep, permanent residents, even naturalized citizens. I mean, it even led to the very conservative Financial Times say this morning in one of its headlines, ICE dragnet strikes terror in U.S. immigrant communities. And so what is the point of this sweep? Is it to strike terror through immigrant communities? How do you see it?
Hey, Aaron, good to be with you, my friend. So the Trump immigration doctrine, let's call it, seems to be evolving a little bit. As you know, I come from the original MAGA movement where it was, you know, if you come across the border illegally, you run the risk of being deported, and that's what Trump had said. He tells us he's focusing on primarily first the folks who've come across the border illegally and then committed crime. And I think the stat I saw recently was somewhere around 70% of the people who are under deportation under Trump have committed an additional crime aside from coming across the border. Are there mistakes made? You know what? I guess so, Arnold. I don't know that it's prevalent, or once in a while we may hear of one or two, but that's going to happen when literally have maybe 12 million people have come across the border illegally in a few years. However, I will tell you that the media spin of Trump is deporting citizens or naturalized citizens or people here is a bit overrun. I believe it's, and especially when you call the real criminal from Maryland, the Maryland man, so to speak, the guy was a bad guy and he was deported. Somehow a judge got him back here. I think the Supreme Court is now telling us, hey, activist judges, local judges, calm down because we're going to overturn any of your restraining orders that you put on Trump.
But, Eric, isn't it up to a court to decide the guilt or innocence of an individual?
Well, I mean, Arnold, you want to be technical, so the minute they come across the border illegally, that's a guilty plea, so to speak. You can't, I mean, just unless you apply for asylum the right way, which they're not. But so therefore, I think the court has decided that. Yeah,
but just on that point of, you know, people who have committed no crimes being caught up in this dragnet, the Cato Institute had some figures. It's a libertarian think tank based here in the United States, based here in Washington, rather. And it says the number of immigrants in detention with no criminal charges or convictions jumped 1,300% from January to mid-June.
Okay, but they're still illegal here, aren't they? They're still gathered and waiting deportation because they've broken the law. He said he was going to focus on, prioritize the folks who committed certainly violent crimes and then other crimes. And then, yes, if you're here illegally, it's still technically a crime. So I think he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. Now, I will give you one thing. There's been a wrench thrown in this where he said at one point they were going to give some sort of amnesty to agricultural workers and hospitality workers. I think Brooke Rollins cleared that up 2 days ago by saying no amnesty, a form of selective deportation where the most needy industries and areas will be able to retain their workers until they can work it through. I am of the purest sense that if you want to be here, come here legally, period. If you don't, then you run the risk of going home and maybe never being able to come back legally.
Right, but doesn't this put a big question mark over the coherence of the Trump immigration policies? I mean, is there anything coherent about it, or is it being done on an ad hoc basis? I mean, some of these rules are being changed on a case-by-case basis from day to day.
Yeah, and I will agree with you that, Anand, and I will also add that the similar situations going on with tariffs. I'm a libertarian financial purist as well, where I say let government, keep government, our government especially, out of the business world, keep them out of transactions, and adding tariffs is the exact opposite of that. And now we're turning out, you know, today alone, just copper, imported copper gets a 50% tariff slapped on it. So the ad hoc nature of both tariffs and immigration now seemingly is very Trumpian. But again, I'll go something we talked about for a long time. As much as I disagree with Trump on tariffs, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they're going to work. I tend to disagree with him on allowing certain industries to retain workers. It may work for him, but whatever it is, the American people, again, it's a blanket, but they have given him the mandate to do what he feels is right, and he's doing what he feels is right.
Yeah, and when it comes to the immigration crackdown, I mean, it's also become a numbers game, isn't it? Because we have the top Trump official charged with implementing these immigration policies, Tom Homan. He says the administration's goal is to detain 7,000 people a day. And he's also threatening to send ICE agents into what are known as sanctuary cities. These are cities which offer protection to people who are undocumented in those cities. Let's listen to some of what Tom Homan had to say.
We're going to double down, triple down on sanctuary cities. Why? Not because we're a blue city or a blue state, because we know that's where the problem is. We know they're releasing public safety threats and national security threats to the streets every day because they don't honor our detainers.
So, Eric, this is fraught with all kinds of political implications, isn't it? I mean, what can we expect in these cities which offer protection to migrants?
Well, I would submit on that it's still illegal. It's a federal offense to come across the border illegally. And if you're harboring illegal activities and criminals, then you should be busted wide open. I mean, if New York City, for example, decided that they thought murder wasn't illegal and they were going to create a sanctuary area for murderers in the New York greater area, it's an extreme example, but should the feds stay away just because New York says we're going to harbor them against the federal government's will and against really the Supreme Court's decision? So I think if you want to harbor illegal criminals, whether they're criminals for immigration or criminals for violent crimes, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get busted, and these folks that are doing it are going to come in front of law enforcement. I would suggest maybe even Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass if they continue up that road. And certainly, if Mamdani wins the New York mayoral race and says that he will allow all sorts of immigrants there to live and roam freely, and he would arrest Bibi Netanyahu if he stepped foot.
Yeah.
If you change the laws of the land as a mayor or a governor, you're gonna feel the wrath of Donald Trump, and he means business with immigration.
Well, it might not need a change of laws because what is taking place in many parts of the country, in fact, I would say in most parts of the country, is de facto. I mean, if we look at immigration policies, it's going to impact the American economy in many ways. If we look at especially industries like agriculture, like the hospitality industry, like the construction industry. We've heard a lot of that. I mean, you're in Florida. That's a state that relies very heavily on migrants. But here is what Will Lambeck of Migrant Justice had to say. Let's listen to him.
The United States has had a do not entry sign on the southern border for decades, where right under it they put a help wanted sign.
So, Eric, don't you see the hypocrisy on that? On the one sign saying no entry, on the other one saying help wanted.
I don't think Trump is being hypocritical. I think he is very adamant about closing the southern border. And to his credit, in the month of May, the last reportable month, there were zero apprehensions, deliveries into the cities of America. I'm not saying no people were stopped. I'm saying under Joe Biden, the average was 61,000 per month that were apprehended and let go into the United States. Trump had zero. He's very serious about that. What I think you're getting at, maybe the soundbite that you just played was getting at, was like, not a help wanted sign underneath, but we all want cheap food. We all want inexpensive strawberries and grapefruits and avocados and whatnot. And yes, if you deport all the folks, I think 28% of the workforce is illegal in the agricultural business. If you deport that 28%, you're going to have to replace it with American workers, likely at a higher labor rate. And yes, prices will go up. So I think he's going to have to deal with higher rates of inflation for food, certainly, maybe even energy, if he does do this mass deportation like he plans, and I think he will. But then it's Donald Trump. So if you start seeing food prices rise and inflation go up, and it's a negative towards, I don't know, his presidency or maybe even the midterm elections, he may pivot on the deportation. It's just what Trump does. You know, he says this, I'm all in on this. He says, well, maybe not so much of that, maybe a little of this and this. It's the Donald Trump way. And you know, for folks like, I'll say folks like the media or center-left people, it's very disconcerting to them because they want to hold him accountable by his work. I'm an anti-war guy. I hate the fact that he, the other day, just said, we may provide more assets to Ukraine, but he pivots. And then I think of myself, okay, it's still Trump, and the successes, you cannot, the scoreboard in itself is just what you need to keep pointing to. Even people who distract or don't like what Trump is doing. Illegal immigration is down. Crime is down. Food prices are down. Everything that he promised to do, he's somehow making it happen, even though he pivots on a lot of the policies that we all want him to be firm on. We want to hold him accountable to.
And then there are also the questions about how this is done. If we look at the use of the military, the United States military, for instance, and this goes beyond the optics of having uniformed soldiers parading through American cities, it goes to the legality of using those soldiers. I mean, they are being used, we are told, to enforce immigration policy or to protect those who are doing the enforcement. I mean, firstly, is this legal? And what kind of a message does that send to all of America?
Fair enough. Very fair question. Is it legal? Highly likely it's legal, and no court has been asked to decide whether it's legal or not. But what I've seen is the kind of federal directed law enforcement going to protect their own agents, the ICE agents that are being attacked in various parts of the country. I would say that's more than legal. And what is the message it sends? It sends a message that Trump isn't going to play around with it. It's the one topic that you're not going to get him to completely backtrack on it. Like, I think the message is he means business and he'll get it done at all costs. I will tell you, when he dropped bombs in Iran, I didn't see that one coming either. And he's coming from a guy who said he didn't want to be involved in any more foreign conflicts that weren't involving our own personal, United States soil. And he did it, and I didn't see that coming either. And you know what? It was a 1-hour event, and all our folks came back safely, and it looks like Iran is standing down for now. So whatever Trump is doing, sometimes you scratch your head, certainly as a supporter, saying, wait a minute, he said he wasn't going to do that. And then it seems to kind of work out. At least short term, it seems to be working out for him.
And looking at the money that is being spent on immigration enforcement, if we look at the passage of that last spending bill, the big beautiful bill as it's called, it allocates a vast amount of money for immigration enforcement. In fact, ICE will ultimately become the biggest law enforcement agency in the country, bigger than the FBI and bigger than some of the biggest urban police forces in the United States. In fact, one governor, a Democrat governor, I should say, compared ICE to President Trump's private military. He compared it, he used a tougher word as well. He said, this is Trump's private Gestapo.
That's extreme rhetoric. So I spent better part of a morning into the afternoon with Kristi Noem and Pam Bondi on Tuesday. And I had this discussion. ICE will become the largest law enforcement agency in the world. So under the last 4 years of Joe Biden, if someone is apprehended at the border, obviously the information is taken down, then they're given a ticket, almost like a business card, a ticket. And sometimes that ticket is when they're supposed to appear. They're free to go into the country. And sometimes it'll be 6, 7 years in the future. Trump doesn't want that. So a lot of the money that ICE is going to get and Border Protection is going to get is going to be judges and people to administer and get the bureaucracy through, get these people processed onto planes or transportation and get them back to the countries that they came from. And that's where a lot of the money is going to be spent. It's not going to be this mass, 2-3 million strong army of people who are just tracking people down in the streets, Soviet style. I just don't see that happening at all. But the left and detractors would like to paint Donald Trump as a king or a fascist, and they would like the people that work for him to be painted as some sort of fascist army. Yeah. It's just not the case.
Eric, I've just got about a minute left. Of course, all this has to do with politics. What are the political implications of what Trump is doing? Because, I mean, the polls tell us that most Americans support what he's doing broadly. They may not support the way in which it's being done, but they support a crackdown on undocumented migrants.
I think his political... If he pivots more and it doesn't work, he'll pay the price, or they'll pay the price in midterms. Right now, the American people are behind him. The CNN, even left-leaning news services that do these polls are pointing at somewhere around 60 to 65% of the folks polled, left, right, and center, agree that to deport illegal immigrants that have come across the border. And for now, he's doing everything that those polls are asking him and telling him he's right to do.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Eric Bolling, thanks so much for joining us.
Always great to be with you.
And that's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.